Well, hello everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the turnout. Just too excited to have this event today. This is looking a little bit silly. There's obviously no amplification coming out of this, but we are recording this and we're gonna post this later as like a podcast sort of thing. So, if everyone could please use this as if it's working and it's also a prop, so it just adds to the vibe. But I'm Carissa Castro, and
And hi, I'm Alejandra Ceballos. We're a part of the events team. And we have our speakers. We have Professor Berg, we have Professor Hickey, and Professor Harlan. So, you wanna
yes.
pass it over?
And then this is Kate from the Prod Club. If you want to.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Kate Kroc. I am the president and founder of the Production Design Club. And I'm really excited to be here with our faculty and discuss just a couple of things about their experience in production design and how they approach us when it comes to films and theater, both. So let's get started. So, starting off, our professors, what first drew you to production design and how'd you get started in the industry?
I didn't know that I wanted to be a production designer until much later in life. Cinephile mother, film fest involvement in Dallas, um, and something about the movie Blade Runner from 1982 just stuck with me. And when I got to LA for other reasons, I'm like, oh my gosh, with my industrial design degree and drafting and art history and all those things, like I knew I was going to do it. Just because I ended up in LA. And to get started, back then we had these things called papers, magazines and things, and I looked them up and started making phone calls. And I'm like, hey, I've got a degree in industrial design, I can draft. And I said, I'll come work for free. Get in the door. And after the first day, this guy's like, can you come back tomorrow? I'm like, can you pay me? And I was making $100 a day before taxes. And it was great, and I just soaked it up every moment and learned like continuity, what's that? And just figure it out. You see it once, learn it, it's programmed. Make mistakes, don't make that mistake again. And you just start programming that into your system. And I just jump in when you can. Ms. Hickey?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Pamela Hickey. I started in theater, actually. I also worked for Disney. So, theater, I'm from Orlando, born and raised. So, got my start in theater with design and technology. I am a theater designer. I did transition into film once I left the Atlanta Opera. So I also designed and worked at the Atlanta Opera for quite some time before transitioning into the film industry. When I got into the film industry, I was a scenic charge and I'm a scenic artist. So if you're not familiar with that position, it is in the art department, and I worked as the liaison between designers and the paint shop to help facilitate the vision on stage. So I continued to design for theater locally in Atlanta, along with working 12, 14-hour days in the film industry, which was just crazy. But yeah, and now I'm here.
I am Richard Berg. I am a production designer. I'm new to this school. This is my first few months, and I'm so happy to be here. I too, like Chase, I wasn't really bent on coming into the film world, but I sort of landed on it because I had basically done all the things that a production designer needs, like in schooling. I had studied fine arts, art history, majored in graphic design. And then I went into architecture school, and then I completed that program. And then at that point, I just had a lot of design capability. I was also a painter as well. So when I moved to Los Angeles from Toronto, and when I was in LA staying at my buddy's place, and I was like, I could not even afford a car at that point. And he said, I was working for an architect in Los Angeles, and he said, why don't you do production design? You could be an art director tomorrow if you wanted to. And I literally said, what does an art director do? Because I really didn't know, although I loved film. and I just wasn't really understanding how it broke down in terms of the artistic jobs and stuff like that. So I did kind of get on a production, and I was working for free. $100 a day for me. I remember when that was a lot of money. I felt like I had actually really crossed into a different plateau when I was earning $100 a day being an illustrator. I remember. But that's how I got into it. And then in Los Angeles, in that world in the '90s for me, dating myself, things moved really quickly. If you had the talent and you had the energy, and you knew a couple people, and you just presented well, and you just wanted to be there, just wanted to help out, whatever it took. That's what they're looking for, and that is what got me in my foot in the door there. And I just got lucky too. A lot of it is just being in the right place at the right time, making yourself available to possibility. So that is my story.
Can you guys give us a quick rundown of when you're handed a script, what is the first thing that goes through your mind? And how do you start?
So sometimes sometimes you have people that you're working with as directors, producers, and the kind of pre-visionary crew that doesn't know how to describe or speak about it. That could be challenging and interesting. Sometimes they come with a lookbook, like with inspiration from the writer or the showrunner, or this is the kind of world we're looking for, or it's based on something historical or from some other fantasy. So you start asking the questions because we do not work on an island. We do not work, I'm the production designer, I will do what I want. That's not how it works. We have to learn to speak the language of the project, each project you're on, and it changes. So asking the right questions. Again, when you hear something and get a clue, then you've learned something, and like you can push back sometimes, say, I hear what you're saying, we can do that, let's tell that same story this way. There's a lot of movement in there, but it's really about adapting to each project. And even if it's a contemporary project, like I've done Entourage and Ballers and Empire, like Empire is completely different. It's over the top and huge and high fashion and comic booky soap opera versus the other shows that were based in that same high lifestyle thing, but very different languages. So it's really about learning the people and being a good listener and coming up with solutions that work within that rule book that changes on each show. And I will do a previs for a television pilot. I will previs the whole pilot, not every scene, but feature film, 50, 60 pages, front to back. And I'm having my 103 students do that at the end as a group so they can not shoulder the whole thing. And I won't do costumes, but if there's a picture with people in there, that I'm going to have to think about that too. And it's a whole universal world that goes into it. And that's just to get the job. You've got to work to get the job in production design because you have to show them how you see that world, and hopefully it aligns with what they want, and you've asked the right questions, and from there it takes all kinds of turns and moves on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to speak to the theater world for set design, since that's the question. I read the script to really get a sense of the characters and the story, not really pulling out design elements first. I want to have an emotional response. Then I sit with that for a minute, read it again. By the third read, I'm probably starting to formulate some ideas. I already know the time period. And this is all prior to the first design meeting with the director. And I show up with inspirational images, sketches, probably 3 different ideations of how I'm perceiving it. At that time, the director could stick traditionally with what is in the script, or the director can change it by 30 years. So you definitely do a lot of preparation before you go to that first design meeting, but then the director is who is going to drive the ship for everybody. So then you step away from the table and continue to work. And so that's how I start. I read it a lot.
For me, I mean, when I get a script, I look at it and I'm always a little bit nervous to read it. And some of it is just like it's a new project. Am I going to be doing this project? Am I going to like this project? You know, am I going to like the script? So I sort of go through the first read of that, and I'm a pretty quick worker, so I don't read it 3 times. I mean, I will over the course of time, but I read it once, and I'm instantly starting to envision where I'm placing this thing. I'm watching it on the screen, like as I'm reading it. So I get through that read, and by the end of that script, if I like the script, like I have it locked in my head how I see the look to be. You know, I don't know if that's going to be agreeable to a producer. Don't know if it's going to be where the director's headed, but I know where I would go from a first read, first blush kind of thing. And then, I mean, the next step, like for me, is how do I get the job? You know, and how do I present what, you know, my excitement for the script. I mean, I'll just say flat out, if I don't like the script, I will graciously bow out, because it's really hard to work on a script or on a production that you're not 100% on board with the script, because that's something that is kind of written in stone for the most part. It's not for the designer to change. So I want to at least be on board with the script. But the next thing I do is like, what am I going to show a director to sell my excitement about the script? And what images and what kind of format? I mean, is it going to be on boards in a one-on-one meeting, or is it going to be on PDF? What is that portfolio or that book or that presentation that you're putting together? And so much of that is just how you manufacture the look of your work, you know. And look, we've all been through school, graduated, and then, you know, when it comes to going to get the first job, you really don't have that much to show, right? So so for me, is just sort of leveling up in terms of what the few pieces that I have. I just want to present them in the best light, the best photography, the best typography, the best copywriting. Like, I don't want to put paragraphs of information on the thing that I know no one's going to read. You know, so for me, it's just less is more. Be very, very simple and straightforward, and allow them to get literally within 1 minute. Just I try and like do the elevator pitch kind of thing, but not just about me, but just try and win them over in the first minute, because sometimes after that minute, if they haven't been won over, you're not going to ever win them over. So do all your homework, and you know, that's always been good for me. Like I know when I come confident to do a presentation, I usually do well in that presentation, and it's usually like well received as well. So that's my process.
So now that we've kind of talked about how you get started in your process, and say you've got the job and you've given your pitch and you're getting ready to get your ideas together, how do you maintain such a like clear vision while incorporating feedback from so many departments?
When I read the question 3 here, the first thing that came to mind was Empire. I've worked on, been doing this for 30 years, and I left an HBO show early to come up to Chicago, and love that city, to work on what had just aired the first season, and 20+ million people were watching a show on network TV live. Like, this was a big deal. When I watched the pilot, I'm like, this is such a juicy, silly, crazy soap opera, but it doesn't look good. So Sina Hamri had taken over, and she wanted me to bring that HBO look to the show, to tell the story of a Jay-Z and Beyonce kind of lifestyle. Like, these are billionaires, these are rich people, and it just looked like cheap, tan. They didn't know they were going to be a hit, so they didn't want to spend money. So the producer I met in Atlanta when I was transitioning up there, and he was a super friendly guy. We went out to dinner, and then the rubber hit the road in Chicago when we started building and revamping things, which was what Lee Daniels wanted me to do. And he said, you come talk to me if anybody ever wants to hold you back or, is fighting you on, I want this to look good. And Cinna was the same way, and this producer was a bully. And so collaborations are typically very pleasant. But sometimes we work with different people, and they have different styles. It's always important to follow the money, and you can't just promise things that you can't afford. You got to check those things out. But sometimes it's just worth the effort to try to make something look good when it's like the centerpiece of your show. And I made a call to our executive producer, and I'm like, I'm just getting bullied here. We're not going to be able to do what you want. He was gone in a week. And we had a new producer who had been around since the Love Boat forever, who was just like, I get it. He rolled his eyes at me all the time at the cost, but he was in support, in accord with everybody else. So it's a difficult situation in the collaboration. Producers can be tough and like, why do you have to spend that much money? And you don't on a lot of things that are quick little bits, but when it's your home base and it's a really important scene for an emotional thing or for action sequences, like you got to spend the money, and hopefully you're working with professionals that understand that and support you in that process, because you're very clear and you're not wasting money. It's on camera. If the camera's looking this way, then we're not going to spend money back here. So it's just very important to be judicious and cautious and realistic, and over time you have a feeling, and I always add 30% to what I think something's going to cost, just instinctively, because it always does. But my instinct's always there. But it's very collaborative, and they can decide, like, let's get rid of this and focus on this, and it's always collaborative. You're never on an island. You always have to work with people in support of the budget constraints and the creative vision, and that's a tough thing to do sometimes, for sure.
Challenging about collaboration. Okay, so collaboration is tricky. It is, and it's picking up from where I left off is that you have your first read, and you might think that your idea is very valuable, and we're all taught to kind of stick by our idea, fight for our idea, and and hopefully that's what we end up doing. But the truth is, with collaboration, is that it's a huge learning opportunity. Like it's sort of if you can step back from your idea being the most precious thing in the world that you've got to hang on to, it's like the soul of who you are. It is the soul of who you are. But in making a production, when you're working with 4 or 5 or 6 other key people, everyone has their necessities that they need, and sometimes our ideas will not be transformable with another department. So we can think on a really big scale, and then the head of photography, the DP, can go like, I don't really know how to film this thing. The ceilings are so low, and I don't really think that I can light this space that properly. And so for me, it's like I'm always ready to step back if it's a compelling argument for doing so. And I think that to me is what collaboration is that everyone has their point of view, but the one that has the most cogent argument and I don't mean argument in the sense of yelling and screaming, I mean it just in presenting their case, their position. I think the one that has the most sort of reasonable and sort of digestible idea is usually the one that sort of has more power in the room, because you kind of want to present that idea that you're sort of going 40,000 feet with it. Not only are you thinking of how beautiful the set is, you're thinking like, is it affordable? Like you always have a sense of how much money the production has, so you want to think about like, I want to design something that the producer right off the bat is going to say like, okay, you know what, I think this can work. It sounds like it could be within my budget. I also want the DP to look at it as just great lighting opportunities. And I'll talk about the lighting. I'll talk about, like putting windows in the set, having backlight, all the little like candy things that, the camera department would love. I also talk about, colors of the set and sort of getting into costuming and how sort of my designs can blend in with the costume designers, and, just basically being on the same page about what color the walls are versus what color the costumes are. There's so many different levels that you can speak about it, but collaboration for me is something that I embrace as a means to figure out what direction I really should be going in based on what other people think as well. The idea always stays in your own mind as being crystal clear because it's your idea, and you're always ultimately trying to guide the path of everyone else towards your idea. So part of that is just how you explain how it could be, and you just setting the stage for them. Sometimes it's just a great description of what this set could be, like how great it'll be for the actors if they have this choice or that choice. Entrances can be from not just here, but there, and there, and maybe one from upstairs as well. It's basically just feeding them sort of the nectar of what that idea is, and just kind of winning them over for, the possibilities that it brings.
It's absolutely a collaborative effort from start to finish. And the more that you can absorb what others bring, I mean, that for me happens in the very first design meeting, honestly, when everyone comes prepared and they're sharing, whether it is costume or lighting, emotional responses, evocative images. I'll often see something that another department brings and be inspired by that, and then go back and incorporate that. You know, having a cohesive piece is. It just makes it fun, entertaining, lovely. Speaking on one set design that I did in particular was Medea. Um, and I went extremely organic with the set. And the costume designer had the same vision and mixed, a lot of organic materials into the costumes, also using stretched linen and natural dyes. And it was really the most stunning piece. And with Medea, if you're not familiar, there's a chorus, a large chorus, and the director did not want the chorus on the physical stage, but in the space. So I cheated the scenery in with ropes and organic material, and then when the costumes were made in a similar fashion, the chorus kind of was breathing into the set from the exterior. So they were always there, but not on stage, and they really kind of fit into the world, the exterior world, essentially. So that was a beautiful collaboration.
So we're going to jump down to question 9. What's a misconception people have about what a production designer actually does?
I think within the industry, you don't see that. I mean, I hopefully you're working with people that know what's happening, but from people in the outside world, um, you know, the main thing is if you're the set designer that I think people misconstrue or don't understand fully is it's just that, like, we are not alone. You have to, as Richard said, get in there and be part of a group and understand in that quick pitch, like, how am I a part of you so that we can all work together? And Pam alluded to the collaboration with costumes, and it really is a chameleon-like transformation in the way you think and the way you interact with the personnel on every show. You can have inspiration from the props team that changes an idea that's really, like, you're not a monolith when you come in as a production designer, but you certainly have to, as the in a film or episodic television, like, you're in charge of the biggest crew on the show. And so it's really important that you listen, communicate, and morph with what those creative, the showrunner or the director, wants. And I think it's just very different on every show, and you have to bend and flow like the reeds with every environment that you're in and every group of personalities, for sure.
It's funny. I go in the opposite direction. That it's like I don't think that most people know what a production designer does. I don't think there's a lot of misconception. I think it's a lot of just not knowing what the title is. And frankly, an art director sounds like a higher position than a production designer to me. So I kind of have my little short snippet of what my definition is of what I do. I'm in charge of the look, the artistic look of a show is kind of how I say what my job is, and I work with a lot of people underneath me, and it involves a lot of scenery design, a lot of painting, like scenic painting, and it involves directing the property, like props, and not to mention huge construction crews and just all the effects that go into something. So I try to explain that, but I think, I always say that design is design. That it doesn't really matter if you're being a production designer in a film, you're being an art director on a stage play, or a set designer on a stage play. It's the same process of like understanding what the parameters, what the scope of the job needs to be for that particular job, and just problem solving and just working with other people to basically unite and try and bring the best out of everyone, because that ultimately is the most fun environment to work in, where everyone feels sort of charged about it, and feels that they're bringing something to it and that they're important to the production. And I never try and make any production about me. I try to make it like literally, try to give credit where credit is due, right the way across, because people do respond to that. And frankly, if we're like some kind of organism, we're all sort of parts of the same thing. We're all in the same family, so let's make it great, kind of thing. That's my feeling about it.
Wrap things up before we open the floor to questions. What is one project that you can recommend that every production design student or people in film should study or look at from a production design perspective?
Because when I speak to my students, it's funny that what y'all have been looking at in the past 10, 15 years is very, very different to what I refer to in sort of the history of film, and what I gravitate towards, especially like because I started a long time ago, um, and so my references are usually films that people don't know, which I'm always surprised about. But I'm like a product of the 70s and 80s, in terms of when I started watching films. So Chase had mentioned Blade Runner, and that was a huge, huge film for me. I've definitely seen that at least 20 times. My favorite film is 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. I like just about any Francis Ford Coppola film. Apocalypse Now, I would highly recommend seeing. And then I would also venture into the world of, uh, Asian cinema, like Chinese cinema, like Wong Kar-wai for me. In the Mood for Love, that film is just one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. So it's just, I guess my advice would be just go earlier than you were born, and then try and explore like the early days of filmmaking, and just you'll get a sense of the evolution of film, because there were some pretty amazing films that were done between like 1960 and 1990 that most people have not seen. So I highly recommend that you go deep into that, just a deep dive.
No, I think, if you go decade to decade, through the evolution of production design and look at, Jaws and the challenges there, or King Kong and how it's evolved throughout time, is pretty just really fascinating, in terms of like set decoration and through lines. I love Amelie, which is a French film. If you look at all of the different frames and the color theory that continues through that film, and just the layering and depth of set dressing and props, I just love that film. It's quirky. I've been told that they can see why I picked that film, but that's just one that I think is really fun and beautiful. So, yeah.
So Apocalypse Now. I would literally I would just get some cash from my mom and like walk to the theater in Dallas during the summers, and I saw Grease probably like 20 times. So silly. But Apocalypse Now, I watched in the theater like when it came out, was still in theaters probably 10 or 12 times, and it was just like, this is so terrifying and badass. Um, Pan's Labyrinth, Guillermo del Toro, like in the fantasy world, just like if the reason cinema works and if production design works and the cinematography and it all comes together with a great story, for me, it's just transformative. It takes you somewhere else. And I like fantasy or future or things that really take you someplace you don't know. Really love the Game of Thrones on TV. And another period piece that I think is just stunning, and it's black and white, on Netflix, is this show called Ripley. And the talented Mr. Ripley, it's a grifter, and it's just stunning in black and white. They're obviously in New York City, early 60s or mid 60s, and then this rich bon vivant has gone off to Italy, and the father wants him back, so he sends the grifter to go get him because he thinks he's a respectable person, and it's just sumptuous. It's all black and white. And I struggle with my kids, so I make them watch classic films. They're like, this looks cheesy, the special effects for certain things, but Space Odyssey doesn't. Like when it was done well, like the Star Wars, they had to invent that technology to do that, and it still looks good. So there's just so much, and there's so many different kinds. Amelie's a great one, and there's there's just a Fellini and so many that are fantastical and over the top. But the new Blade Runner is also amazing. The 2049, and I got to work for that writer on a project. Did it just drop some names there? Sorry, I'll pick those up. But sorry, but there's just so much great stuff. And I will start watching a movie with cheesy special effects or just acting or something and just turn it off like within the first 5 minutes. A lot of times when I'm streaming, because it just doesn't connect you and transport you. You're going, but and so great filmmaking, it's top to bottom, actors, wardrobe, the whole thing. So it's a rare thing.
Well, thank you all. That was. If anybody has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and ask. So don't be afraid. Yes, we'll bring the mic to you.
Hey everybody, I'm Chloe. I'm a senior in production design and art history minor student. Hey, I was gonna ask, I guess, if I were to ask you, what is one of your biggest learning opportunities or experiences? What comes to mind first, working in your respective industries?
Well, I started in music video world in the 90s and did some really big ones. I got very, very lucky, and I was working with a production designer that was pretty incredible, Tom Foden. I learned so much from just having sort of this non-program, like the music videos are. They're not scripted. The director kind of is like basically runs the show, so there's not like a whole committee that things need to go through. You get to meet these like really big artists. So I kind of learned a little bit about everything doing that, and after I think I was doing it for about 8 or 10 years, and then I jumped into. I was also doing commercials, and that was yet a different discipline about design. And then at that point, I got a call from Jerry Bruckheimer to start working on one of his shows, and I entered the TV world in around 2000 and kind of have never left.
I think maybe one of my biggest, I don't know, learning opportunities. I started in theater and I love theater. Theater did not pay my bills. And so my friends were like, why don't you go into film? And so I did that. Film really paid my bills and helped me support my child. But I still did theater because it fed my soul. So I think for me, it's having a good time and loving what you do. It's a lot of long hours, and if you're not absolutely passionate about it and you don't love it, get out. I don't know. I mean, but I just learned to really love what I do and make it fun and have a good time with it. A lot of, I guess, from the day to day, it's like everything's an emergency, and it can be very, very stressful. But if you can kind of find a way to let that roll off a little bit, and you're one person, you can only do so much, and leaning on colleagues and friends and people that have certain skills, to help you out. But I guess just not allowing that to you know make you explode. I don't know.
If you don't love it, the hours and the sacrifices with family, with loved ones, like it's very demanding when you're on a project. And then you got time off. So it's, you're just off sometimes too much time off. When I am involved in a project, like I'm going to give 110% of myself, and I want it to be the best it can be. And I'm going to fight for those things to be greater. Say, hey, what if we did this to add something? And in that, I just say that I take the work very seriously. But I don't take myself seriously in that process. And by that, I mean, like, you want to do that? Well, that's going to be terrible, but it's your show. Okay, like I've said my part, right? It's going to look bad. Okay, cool. Not to fight it, not to do, like, if it's never your show. Like, it's your stamp, and it says production designer at the end or the beginning or whatever, and it does mean something. And so you have to take it seriously, take the work seriously, but at some point, if somebody goes, we had a moment on Entourage where we had to find a piece of fine art, and I had Richard Diebenkorn, a California artist, estate, ready to give us a piece, and he's like, I don't like abstract. And I showed him hundreds of pictures, and he didn't like art. And I said, well, that's why you should trust me. And we ended up I showed him the dogs playing poker, and I'm like, this is what you're going to get. This is what you're going to get if we can't decide on something. But I didn't cry. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's your show. You know what I mean? So take the work seriously and invest everything you can. But at a certain point, let it go, So anyway, that would be my advice.
Any other questions?
Actually, I am a sophomore production design major with a focus on set design. I also kind of have a preference for theater, but I quickly learned I have to be multifaceted and be able to work in different, do commercials, do theater, do film. I want to know how you guys transitioned between designs, because I know a set design for film is very different from theater, for example, because you have to account for cameras, for cameras. That's all I know right now. But how did you transition between those? Because I don't know if you learned that in school, because it would be a lot to learn.
Thing you set out to do, you will hopefully get to do. But along the way, all kinds of things are going to come up, and take them. It's not a straight highway from beginning to end success. It is a multi-route faceted shrub, not a tree, that goes here and back. And I've done reality shows. I've done reenactments of pets saving people for ABC, all kinds of stuff. I've done music videos. I worked on Big Brother season 2 as the game designer for that, and I was miserable. I hated it. There's nothing I was going to show, but I was working for 5 or 6 months, and it was a good lesson. I'm never doing this again. I think reality TV shows are not fun to like watching them, and at the end of the day, I want to make art, and that's not the medium for that. But it pays the bills. I also was able to support my family, and was at CBS, which was really close to my house, and there's all kinds of routes. I've worked on theater productions for live special TV specials. Haven't done a lot of theater myself, but take the road, especially now as it's contracted here. Take what you can get, and know that you may work with somebody that's doing something that you like. So go there and be great. And I've had calls from the most unsuspected places for somebody I met who was a gaffer on a multi-camera TV live show. I did the Keenan Ivory Weigh-In show, which was a late night talk show. And from that, I met people who later would call me 4 or 5 years later and go, hey, I'm working on this cool thing. And you just never know who you're working with. and you never know where the shows could take you. And so right now, take the work. Take the work and see where it takes you. And you can start reaching out for the things you want to do, but work when you can and meet the people, because without people recommending you, you are nothing. So go there, be joyous, and do a good job. And then you can focus on your plan more. I got a cold call for Entourage after I said no more reality shows, and I got a cold call, the one cold call out of the Art Directors Guild book I've ever gotten from the production designer, like 6 months later after I said no more. But I'd already established myself pretty well for many years. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're in class together, but it's definitely not linear. And piggybacking on that, just, I was a single parent taking care of my son. I was like, I'll dig a ditch, to provide. But theater to, I worked at Disney and had great benefits. So that was important. I was in the character programs and development department, which I never anticipated being in costume design, but I was working for them doing digital renderings, and I got to design a few things for the fairies and for Tinkerbell that I never, imagined. And from there went to, it's just not linear. And I took everything that I could get. But once I got to Atlanta, I worked for in the corporate world of design, which is totally different, where we're designing and painting and building things for pharmaceutical companies or for the Brave Stadium, or and that world is entirely, different. I did a set for 2 Chainz. I'm like, I have 2 Chainz on my resume. It's just it's not linear at all. And I just always kept telling it, I love what I do. So if I can do that in some facet and create art, that's what I set out to do. So, yeah.
I totally agree. It's nonlinear, and that you got to take the work, because that is where you open yourself up to ideas that you've never really thought about before. And my background's architecture, but coming into film, like all I've done is videos, commercials, and TV shows, and a couple films. Sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but I've never done theater. I've never done design for the stage. And it's funny, Angeli, when you said, like at the beginning of your question, you almost were suggesting that it's easier in some way to do film, or more complex, actually, is what I think you positioned it as. More complex to do film than it is to do theater. And from my point of view, and my experience in watching theatrical productions, musicals, and stuff like that, like I have so much respect for that level of design, because almost for the opposite reason that you were suggesting, is that film and TV is so open-ended in terms of problem solving. Like there's so many different ways to solve a problem, and sometimes it's just throwing money at it, which they have. But if you go into the theater world, everything is so confined. The budget is like, even for something that's going to be a big show, is still small. In terms of like the actual stage space that you're designing for, I mean, it's incredible to think that you can create multiple environments in a space that's this big, and just the amount of design problem solving and the idea of flying things and the movability of stage pieces and stuff like that, to me, is fascinating. And not to mention the way things have to be lit in stage. Like it's so much more refined in a certain way to me, that I find it like incredibly challenging. And to me, that make excellence. It's like when you don't have as many choices and you're working within that small box, that you actually have to make some really good decisions. And those are the jobs that you want, actually, where it really does challenge you to think outside your own box, kind of thing. So I think it's a great question.
Hi, I'm Elmer. I'm a second-year MFA student. I'm directing. So I wanted to ask, do you have any do's and don'ts for directors communicating with production designers. Coming from the only interactions we have with them is we interact with students here at SCAD for most of it, and I feel like it's probably a more low key situation because there's often not a lot of money involved, so everyone is aware of that. So yeah, do you have any do's and don'ts or recommendations for us directors? What's good to communicate to you guys?
First of all, don't ever make eye contact with a production designer. Okay. Just like talk to the floor. No. Listen, if it for me, it's such a joy working, having gotten to work with some really big directors. They know what they want, but they are not the design technicians, you know. So some of the best relationships with the Mark Mylods and the David Nutters of the world that I've worked with in LA, like they have an idea and they'll come to you, like they're not going to show me the floor plan. I'm designing the furniture first, and the doors and the windows and the archways blocking. So we're already thinking about that. And where's the camera? I'm lining up my shots for the conversation. Where's my wide going to be? That's going to go back through the archway to the entryway with the dining room behind. Like I'm already thinking about that stuff. So, you know, the conversations about hopefully we know enough to know what you're going to need. And so, but I guess not getting, by keeping things structured in this is what I want to get out of it and this is what I need. Instead of this is how, you know what I mean? This is what I want you to do. Like it just like that collaborative element between two is when it's brilliant and when it's really fun and when I can sass you back, you know what I mean, a little bit, you know. It's like, well, how about a good idea? And, you know what I mean? Like, come on, I'm the people that I work with, I mess with a lot because it's stressful, and why not enjoy yourself? But I've certainly worked with producers who are like, well, this is trying to lay out what the design's gonna, you know, and that stuff, and it's like there's a little bit of lane, you know, that you can shift into and out of, but not being too specific where you're boxing yourself in and letting, you know, Richard say, I get that, let's try this. You know what I mean? That's the best collaboration. It's not to pin yourself down too heavily.
I have worked with directors that know exactly what they want. And I've heard responses from other departments that don't appreciate that so much. I love that. I think every director is different, and just being able to have respect for each other and for each other's craft and vision and collaboration, and yeah, I mean, I think some really beautiful things can be created, and even with directors that know exactly what they want, there's still wiggle room in that, you know, but yeah.
I think as a director, you have a massive responsibility because, you know, let's face it, directors in any of the formats that we've been talking about, you know, be them commercial, video, film, TV, or stage, they're running the show. And everyone's looking to them, all eyes are on you. And with that, there's a huge responsibility to use that power in a way that is that makes a difference for the production and the people that are working in that production. So my favorite directors that I work with are human beings. Those are my favorite. The ones that show their vulnerability, have the ability to say, you know what, I'm not sure about that. Let me think about it and I'll come back to you. You know, and then the best ones that I've seen are the ones that embrace their crew. And know that they can't be where they are and do what they do without, you know, the hundreds of people that are working in silence around them. So, yeah, my best advice for any director is the same advice I would give to any department head, you know, be it photography, costume, production design, what have you, being a producer as well. Is just be humble, you know? And then for me, it's just, ultimately it's a balance. There's only, like, I'm binary in the way a person is. They're either full of love or they're full of fear. and there's nothing in between, and you choose what side you want to be on. But the ones that emit love in how they work and their passion for it and how they respect other people, and they're treating people like it's a family and not like they're your slaves. Those are the most successful ones of any position I've ever seen in the business.
I'm a senior, so this is my last year. Don't wait to get a production designer. Do not wait 3 weeks before you shoot to get a production designer. Like, they should be the first person you grab. Like, this is who I want to work with. Spend the time, even before pre-pro. Grab them. They are there to make your world come to life. It is their job to make your vision become a reality. So having that person be with you through that whole process is really important. And I find that is lacking in a lot of in SCAD in general. And panels like this we aim to help. Yeah, just keep communicating, keep talking, have them be there and be your person. But yeah, that's my biggest thing.